All right, chapter three. Starting out here out of order, obviously, because this is where I'm at with my classes. Title of chapter three is League of Nations 1930s, and it, pretty much you guessed it, how the league deals with or doesn't deal with conflict and tension that folds out during the 1930s. And Section 3.1, overall question asked, how did the rise of extremism affect international relations? So the section predominantly is going to deal with the rise of extremism in places like Italy and Japan and also Germany and what the fallout of that is. Now, the section is long, so bear with me. We'll define extremism and talk about what the rise of extremism is in a bit, but before we get to the 30s, I want to take a step back and actually a bunch of steps back and recap a couple things that we already covered heading into this chapter. And we're going to head back to right after World War One for a bit. So, right after World War One in Europe, Treaty of Versailles, right, main treaty to end war and punish Germany, also creates League of Nations on top of the other treaties that ended World War One. France does not trust Germany at all. The relationship is very poor. Reparations creates even bigger rift in that relationship, and Germany also resents the Treaty of Versailles. United States, they're going to return to isolationism. That's their foreign policy. Foreign policy is being the way a country interacts with other countries. So their foreign policy is isolationism, isolate themselves, not getting involved in world affairs. And they're going to pop out a few times here and there what's in their best interest to, or to prevent conflict from occurring. Now, the United States, they do this because, one, again, isolationism, but from that, they don't ratify the Treaty of Versailles or join the League of Nations, even though League was the brainchild of Woodrow Wilson, 14th point. Isolationist foreign policy is going to give way to the Roaring Twenties in the U.S. Roaring Twenties was 1921 to 1929. U.S. experiences great economic prosperity, solid, and with this economic prosperity, the U.S. takes this and is able to help out other countries. For example, like Dawes Plan, providing loans to Germany so that they could float their own economy and also pay back reparations to kind of ease the tensions. It's also going to resolve the Ruhr crisis. U.S. Their prosperous economy is going to give way to some gradually improving relations towards the mid to late 1920s, and that prosperity is going to last in the United States through most of 29. And only problem is that it ends in October of that year, October 29th, 1929, also known as Black Tuesday. United States stock market's going to crash. The U.S. economy plummet. Prosperity is over. It's done. It's gone. Uh, that date again is known as Black Tuesday because the economy just tanks. All right, the economy spirals down, sends the U.S. into financial ruin, and the U.S. the economic crash. This time period is going to be known as the Great Depression. Economic depression just refers to a strong economic downturn. So Great Depression starts in the United States, but remember that the U.S. was assisting other economies in the 1920s, and well, since the U.S. economy is crashing, the leading economy of the world, most powerful nation in the world, their economy is going to collapse. That's going to cause other economies to collapse as well. So around the world, economies are going to fall, and they're going to suffer the same fate. So what's it like living under the Great Depression? Well, the impacts of that economy are going to be felt throughout society. Businesses suffer, people suffer, everyone suffers. There's a lot of unemployment, very high unemployment. Workers are going to lose their jobs, they have no money, they can't support their families, they lose their homes, they can't eat. Conditions are going to worsen. This is just really scraping the surface. I mean, it's international, so we'll go deeper in American. Just know conditions are really bad. People suffer. Right now, how does this impact other nations? Well, all the impacts faced in the United States are going to extend around the world. So German economy is going to collapse, and again, they're not able to pay their reparations. Britain, France, Belgium, they're no longer receiving their reparations. That impacts them paying their loans back to the U.S., and their economy is going to fall too. This lack of money circulating around the world is going to lead to a decline in trade, and a decline in trade is going to further hurt more the developed nations' economies. This is going to lead to a period of deflation. Deflation is economic prospect where there's a decline in prices that's caused by a decline in wages, also available money, and that's going to impact Europe and Japan. And in these places, businesses are going to collapse as well. Economic problems, that's going to lead to further unemployment in unstable countries. This unemployment and suffering of the people, that's going to lead to civil unrest. And when there's civil unrest and this instability is eventually going to lead to change. As more and more countries' economies fall, their governments fall out of favor. Now, when the people believe their government is no longer effective, they can look for change in a couple different circumstances. Under the circumstance the Great Depression brought, the people are going to look towards more extremist ideologies. Extremism refers to being like outside of the social norms, or like radical. Ideology is just a way of thinking on how things should be. So you're going to see more extremist and also sometimes referred to as radical ideologies start to rise. Radical ideologies like communism. First, we saw back when the Russian Revolution occurred, right as World War One is happening. Russia dropped out of World War One to fight their own revolution, eventually installing communism. In case you don't remember what communism is, communism seeks to create a classless society, no social classes, everyone equal, no lower, no middle, no upper class. Government is in charge of all the means of production, so they can guarantee everyone has equal everything. There's no private ownership, there's no competition. Usually, a totalitarian ruler is going to be at the head to make sure the government stays in power. A totalitarian is just one person, pretty much all the power, and no opposition. Main other extremist ideology we'll see is fascism. Fascism is kind of similar to totalitarianism. When you have a single party rule, and this party emphasizes extreme nationalism, they use violence to keep order. Usually, fascist regimes are totalitarian, but not all totalitarian regimes are fascist. Now, these radical ideologies, they look a lot more appealing when people have nothing. So as more economies go down, you're going to see more support for extremist ideologies pop up. Support for fascism and communism, they're going to grow in places like the U.S., Britain, France, but they're never going to take hold there. But in places like Germany, like Italy, like Japan, also Spain, their democratic governments, or at least quasi-democratic, are going to collapse as conditions get worse. And gradually, the will of the people is going to take hold, and their governments are going to transform into entirely different forms. Fascism is going to take hold as leaders emerge who claim they can fix society's problems, which were caused by the previous forms of government, they say, as long as people put their power into them, and that's exactly what happens. And this is what's going to give way to the rise of Adolf Hitler. Starting off in Germany, Adolf Hitler, most known for being the German Führer, he's not even actually German. He's born in Austria-Hungary, but eventually moves to Germany in the 1900s. He's a soldier for Germany in World War One. He comes home to find that Germany is struggling. He sees the country struggling, and he's going to adopt more radical views. He's going to begin organizing the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which winds up being the Nazi Party, and he's quickly going to gain support by delivering speeches around Germany that are very critical of the Weimar Republic, Weimar being post-war Germany. He's also going to blame Germany's politicians like Kaiser Wilhelm, claiming that they could have won the First World War if they could have just kept fighting. He's also going to portray the government as weak and also at risk of falling to communism if no action was taken. Communism, everyone perceived that as a threat at this time. So he organizes the party further, and this actually turns into an unsuccessful attempt at revolution in 1923 when Hitler and his supporters are going to attempt to overthrow the government but fail. This is known as the Beer Hall Putsch. But they wind up failing miserably. Hitler actually winds up getting arrested and thrown in jail, and while he's in jail, he writes Mein Kampf, his manifesto / autobiography that details his plans for Germany. Before moving forward, keep in mind, after the war, Germany is not doing good. Leadership was seen as weak. Treaty of Versailles universally hated amongst the Germans, also viewed as keeping Germany weak. And from this, Hitler was able to actually see some success and gain some support. When Hitler gains more support, it was when Germany was doing worse. So the worse Germany was, the more support Hitler had. Now, fast forward a couple years, Hitler's going to get out of jail, and he's going to find that Germany is doing better. Now, they're not doing amazing, don't misunderstand here, but American loans, like from the Dawes Plan, have somewhat helped stabilize Germany's economy to the point where they're not teetering on the brink of collapse as much as it previously was, and they're also able to make their reparations payments. So Hitler's success, it depended on Germany doing worse. So he gets out of jail, right? And in Germany's 1928 election, Nazi Party obviously puts up some candidates into the German Reichstag, but they get like barely 3% of the vote. That's not very good. However, the year after that, 1929, Great Depression hits. American economy collapses. Europe falls right after. American loans no longer keeping Germany afloat. Germany experiences pretty quick economic downturn, creates a large amount of instability. They can't pay their reparations, and conditions are going to worsen. They're going to worsen to the point where in 1932, elections that year wind up yielding Nazi Party getting about 37% of the vote. Now, this is not the majority. However, there is now going to be more Nazi Party members in the German parliament than any other party. Nazi Party is going to take this barely a third of a victory, and they're going to turn around and appoint Hitler chancellor. So Hitler is going to legitimately rise to power for the most part. I always get a question like, oh, didn't Hitler seize power? Well, to get the chancellor, no, he's legitimately appointed. Now, did he take advantage of all the weaknesses in Germany that he spent his whole time criticizing in order to reach the position of chancellor? Absolutely. Now, once he does reach the position of chancellor, though, this is where he is going to begin to truly seize power. Once he's in that position, he's going to move to consolidate power as much as he can. He's going to bring it all to himself. He's going to remove all political opposition. If you are not a member of the Nazi Party and you are not having power in any way, shape, or form, he's going to end Germany's constitution. He's going to use extreme violence to maintain order. He's going to emphasize extreme nationalism. He is effectively going to create a totalitarian state where he has all the power and no opposition. The ruling style is going to be fascism. You have the Nazi Party at the head, and you're going to emphasize extreme nationalism in order to keep support. And Hitler is effectively going to become a dictator as he establishes what the Nazis referred to as the Third Reich, or Third German Empire. So we'll get into exactly where Hitler goes and what he does in a bit. But first, I want to pivot to some other places, some older refreshers and some new. First place I want to jump back to is Russia. Russia drops out of World War I with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and they're going to focus on the Russian Revolution, turning Russia communist. Originally, Vladimir Lenin takes power. 1924, though, Joseph Stalin takes power. Now, Russia is communist. Communism and fascism, they are not going to get along too well. When Hitler comes to power, Stalin is going to fear Hitler eventually wants to invade the Soviet Union. Soviet Union, real quick, just Federation of Russia and its friendly communist countries and states and territories around it. Fascism and communism, they are not going to get along. Now, Japan historically had a government under military rule. They had what was known as the Tokugawa shogunate pretty much all the way up until the Meiji Restoration. Meiji Restoration was when Japan changed to a more constitutional democracy style of government. They still had an emperor, but they were kind of moving closer to more Western style democracies. The Meiji Restoration, they replaced their government in response to the threat of imperialism. So Japan replaced their government, rapidly modernizes, and then they begin their own imperial journey at the end of the 1880s. They're going to stay that way until pretty much after World War One, but kind of barely holding on through the 1920s. Throughout the 1920s, Japan's economy wasn't great. World War One kind of artificially boosted their economy with the production for war, but after the war, that demand just wasn't there. Unemployment rose. It got somewhat better during the late 1920s, but it fell off again once the Great Depression hit. That's just the economic side. Politics weren't popular in Japan either. The Japanese thought that democracy was weak and that politicians were corrupt. They weren't really great fans of the Paris Peace Conference or the Treaty of Versailles either. Washington Naval Conference, too, encouraging disarmament, wasn't popular. There was a lot of anti-Western sentiment and more growing nationalism. Also, public opinion kind of swayed towards the idea that Japan should be busy exploiting China's weakness rather than playing politics. And after this, democracy kind of fell flat on its face, and boom, we're back to a military dictatorship. Similarities between Italy, Japan, Germany, all of them are going to turn to extremism. All of them are also going to eventually ally. Now, one country that moved towards extremism that we have not mentioned yet is Spain. Spain is a little bit more complicated. Spain is under a constitutional monarchy. Constitutional monarchy is when there is a monarchy, you have a king or a queen whose power is prescribed by a constitution. So they are under King Alfonso the 13th. Yeah, that sounds right. Anyway, this constitutional monarchy is going to fall out of favor, and Spain is going to kind of fall up for grabs. And several different groups are going to vie for power. You have monarchists who want the king and the Catholic Church to resume power. You have anarchists who don't want an overreaching government. You have liberals who want democracy. You have socialists who want state to take control of businesses so that everyone can be guaranteed basic needs. You have communists who want communism and state control of everything so they can guarantee total equality. So many different groups. No one can really take power. 1923, though, the army of Spain is going to carry out a coup. In Parliament, they are going to be removed, and the king is going to stay, while a guy named Don Miguel Primo de Rivera takes power, and he declares himself emperor. He does not last too long, though. He's going to fall out of favor once the Great Depression hits. The king's also going to abdicate, and Spain is back in a civil war. Now, Spanish Civil War is back on, and no single party is really able to get power. You have the left wing vying for power. That's the socialists. That's the communists. Those are the anarchists. They're going to create the Popular Front. The right wing consists of the church, the army, the wealthy. They're going to found the Spanish Confederation of Autonomous Right. And civil war is going to break out in July of 1936. Now, by the end of 1936, Francisco Franco, hopefully that's a familiar name, he's going to control most of northern Spain and realize that it's going to take a lot more to control all of it. So he is going to appeal to Hitler and Mussolini. He's going to ask them for help and also claim that he's fighting communists in an uprising in Spain. Hitler and Mussolini don't really care all that much about Spain, but obviously did not want communism to spread to Spain. They also did not mind the idea of having another fascist dictator in Europe, especially one that close to France. So Hitler and Mussolini are going to give guns and troops to Franco. Here's the thing, though. This is considered to be Spain's civil war, a war between the people of Spain. Hitler and Mussolini technically are now aiding one side of the civil war over the other, and there's not international involvement. Other nations weren't so willing to throw their hat into the ring. Britain, France, US, they're kind of split on their reactions. Some saw Franco as another brutal fascist dictator. Others saw him as a deterrent to communism. So the other side, the side fighting Franco, is going to ask Britain and France for help. And they really had no interest in going to war or provoking Germany, as we'll continue to see throughout the chapter, a little foreshadowing there. But France and Britain are going to go to the League of Nations and establish a non-intervention community. And it means exactly what it sounds like. Non-intervention, not getting involved. No foreign aid provided by any member of the committee. So Britain and France join, deny any assistance. Germany and Italy join too, but ignore it. Now, obviously, we know Germany and Italy sent assistance. Why did they do this? Well, Italy, Mussolini wants to flex his power. Very publicly going to support non-intervention, but it's kind of hard to do that when you have 50,000 Italian troops going to Spain. Also, he's going to portray himself as fighting against communism, which was still a threat to Italy. Germany, on the other hand, this is going to be a test of Germany's newly rearmed military. Hitler's going to give soldiers and guns to Franco while also selling guns to the other side. So yeah, speaking of the other side there, this group that's fighting against Franco, they needed help. They asked France and Britain. They said no, but someone didn't. The other country that hates fascism and would maybe want to kind of fight Germany, that's going to be the USSR led by Joseph Stalin. This puts Stalin's in a bad spot, though. He didn't want an ally of Hitler to take control of Spain. He still considered Hitler to be the biggest threat to Soviet security. He'd also been trying to make nice with Britain and France, but also knew that they wouldn't want communism in Spain. So what wound up happening is that Stalin gives kind of just enough support for the opposition to keep up the fight against Franco, but not win it. And he cuts off support not too much later in 1938. This allows Franco to eventually pull through, and in January of 1939, he is going to win. He sets up a government in Spain that's similar to Hitler's and Mussolini's, but he does not go completely fascist. He gives the church some power and even avoided persecution of Jewish people like Hitler did. Spain really doesn't even actually join World War II when it breaks out, and Hitler seemingly expected him to throw in his support, but Franco didn't. When the war ended and Hitler and Mussolini were obviously gone out of power, Franco winds up staying in power in Spain a lot longer. Anyway, after 3 years of fighting in Spain, Francisco Franco and the right-wing nationalists, they are going to win. So Franco is going to establish a military dictatorship that is mostly fascist. And yeah, now that we have the other countries out of the way, let's jump back to Germany. So Hitler gains power. What does he want to accomplish? Short list, really. First thing off, he wants to bring Germany back to being a major power. He wants to restore Germany to its former glory, or whatever glory it seemingly had. This means he's going to redevelop the German army, the German navy, and the German air force. Keep in mind, Treaty of Versailles limited the army, said no navy and no air force. Also, Hitler wants to destroy the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler and most Germans had a great disdain for the Treaty of Versailles due to how harshly it punished Germany, and this is one of the main gripes against it, that it would punish Germany too harshly, and we'd end up right back where we started. So Hitler is going to take up the foreign policy of expansionism. It's exactly what it sounds like. His foreign policy is going to be to expand. Now, where is he going to expand? Well, in his book Mein Kampf, which my Mac keeps auto-correcting to something else since the editor doesn't want me typing it down. Anyway, in the book, Hitler mentions this idea that he wants to expand Germany's living space, in a concept he refers to as Lebensraum. Lebensraum is a German term for living space, and this is not new. It became popular back in the 1800s, but Hitler used it here to justify his foreign policy. So he's wanting to take territory for Germans, of Germans, that has Germans. Well, looking at one of his goals, destroying the Treaty of Versailles, one task he's going to look to accomplish is taking back the territory that was lost due to the Treaty of Versailles, because in his perspective, he just wants to right the wrongs of this harsh and unfair treaty. Long-term goals of this is going to be taking places that have Germans, German people, are historically German, speak German. Through doing all of this, Hitler claims that he can help Germany, the country, and Germany, the people, with all of their problems, and the people are going to support him. There's not really an alternative. Hitler pretty much offers them a solution to all of their problems, and their alternative is to continue and sit there and suffer. So the German people are going to support him. Of course, another alternative is persecution. There's that, but anyway, so to rebuild your army, Hitler enables conscription. Conscription is mandatory military service. If you are chosen, congrats, you are now serving in the military. This is going to raise about 600,000 soldiers, 6 times more than permitted by the Treaty of Versailles, obvious violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Pretty much everything he wants to do is a violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Also forms the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, again, violation of the Treaty of Versailles, and this is pretty early on, 1933, 34, 35. So why doesn't anyone stop him right off the bat? Well, every time Hitler obviously violates the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler's going to convince anyone who cared, namely Britain, that his motives are peaceful and honorable and justifiable, since the Treaty of Versailles was so harsh and cruel towards Germany, and they will believe it. 1935, a region known as the Saar, they wind up returning to Germany after a plebiscite. Plebiscite is just a vote on which country territory wants to join. A very valuable region for coal, and plebiscite is in line with the Treaty of Versailles, even though Hitler used a ton of propaganda to skew the results in Germany's favor. This is going to alarm France, but Hitler is going to proclaim that any remaining grievances between Germany and France are going to be settled with the return of the Saar region. So people were kind of accepting of his shtick, I guess we'll call it, by saying that everything that he was doing had peaceful intentions and honorable intentions and was justifiable, since he's just righting the wrongs of this harsh treaty. Although also in 1935, Britain, France, Italy, they're going to sign an agreement known as the Stresa-Front. This reaffirms the Carnot treaties, also maintains the independence of Austria, which is one of Hitler's biggest targets. It's going to attempt to resist any future attempted changes to the Treaty of Versailles. Now, even though this was a public rebuke of Hitler, it didn't really do much. There was no real punishment. It was too vague. It wasn't specific. It barely even mentioned Germany. Realistically, the only way to stop Hitler from doing anything would be to invade Germany, which no one actually wanted to do. So the Stresa Front, the League of Nations, everything, really everyone else opposing Germany, pretty much gets undermined, though, when Britain and Germany entered into an agreement known as the Anglo-German Naval Agreement. And under this agreement, Germany could have a navy that is 35% of the strength of the British Navy. Britain does this to maintain their own naval supremacy. It undermined literally everyone else and everything at the same time. It appeared to kind of allow Germany's violations of the Treaty of Versailles, and it showed just how fragile the Stresa Front was. Now, a bit later in 1935, Italy is going to invade Abyssinia. That's modern day Ethiopia. And we'll get into the specifics of this in the next section. But Mussolini did this kind of expecting zero pushback from France or Britain, since they really didn't give any pushback to Hitler. League of Nations, however, winds up going against Italy, and France and Britain join the League's decision in response. Mussolini and Italy are done with the Stresa Front. Germany rearming, Britain seemingly accepting it, and the collapse of the Stresa Front is going to leave France vulnerable and isolated, kind of similar in the same shape as the USSR. So it's pretty much saying that they actually enter into a treaty of mutual assistance in 1935. France did not love the idea of making a treaty with the communists. They were untrustworthy to them, but they agreed to do this in a show of support to each other. And the goal was, if that either of them were attacked by a European country, the other would support. Anyways, back to Germany. Where is Hitler going to go in his expansionist foreign policy and a quest for a Lebensraum, or a living space for the German people? First thing we mentioned was the Saar region. That's a plebiscite, valuable in terms of resources. Other than that, though, Hitler is going to believe that he's not going to face any pushback from any European countries if he does anything. So he's going to take a big gamble and invade an area known as the Rhineland. The Rhineland was an area along the border of Germany and France, and from the Treaty of Versailles, it was supposed to be demilitarized. So Hitler takes a huge gamble because, in reality, if German forces were met with any force of resistance, they probably would have been pushed back. Germany was not ready to take this kind of action. Hitler knew this. So the two outcomes are pretty much either the barely prepared German military marches into the Rhineland that oppose, or Germany is going to be forced to retreat. Now, what winds up happening? No resistance, none, nada, nuka. Really nothing besides strong words from Britain and France, but no real action. And this is going to solidify Hitler's belief that France and Britain aren't going to do anything if Hitler continued to violate the Treaty of Versailles. So, do France and Britain oppose this? Absolutely. Do they take any action besides some harsh words? No. They wanted to avoid war at all costs, and this is going to start to show Hitler that. Hitler justifies remilitarizing the Rhineland by again saying that he's righting the wrongs of the harsh Treaty of Versailles. And Britain actually kind of accepts this. They also believe that strong Germany would be a good deterrent to communism and the USSR. France's alarm bells are going off like crazy since France and Germany now technically share a border. The USSR thinks that a rearmed Germany would wind up attacking Poland, which the USSR also has a claim to, and also threaten Russia's security itself. But no country is strong enough to do anything without help from Britain, at least, which also does not want to go to war. Next place Hitler wants to go is Austria. This is one of his main objectives, and he achieves the union of Germany and Austria under the Anschluss. Obviously, this is again a violation of the Treaty of Versailles and also Saint Germain as well. But Hitler had the Nazis fake a little bit of a revolt and take out Austria's chancellor, and had Nazi troops ready to stand by and march into Austria under the guise of keeping order. But this actually didn't work because they faced a little bit of opposition from Italy. Italy probably would have intervened, and Germany really was not ready for war against anyone, nonetheless Italy. So Hitler winds up signing the Rome-Berlin Axis with Italy in late 1936. Also wound up signing the Anti-Comintern, Anti-Communist Pact with Japan about the same time. And finally, in 1938, Hitler achieves Anschluss, and the Nazis stage another revolt in which the government of Austria loses control very quickly. German troops are ready and move in, and they declare Austria to be a part of Germany. Just like before, France and Britain are going to protest, but they're not going to take any action. Another territory is going to be the Sudetenland. Sudetenland is a part of Czechoslovakia and was mostly German, or also full of people that supported Germany. One of Hitler's long-term goals was to take Czechoslovakia, and the Sudetenland would give him his start. Riots and demonstrations begin, mostly advocated by the Nazis to show support for Germany taking over Czechoslovakia. The Czech president, though, is going to believe that Hitler's behind this, and he did this to justify Germany invading Czechoslovakia. He winds up appealing to Britain and France. Britain and France wind up putting pressure on Czechoslovakia to give in to Hitler. Britain and their leader Neville Chamberlain seemed to think that Hitler's demand of the Sudetenland was justifiable. Again, an error of the Treaty of Versailles that needed to be fixed since it was too harsh against Germany. Obviously, Czechoslovakia does not want to give itself up to Hitler, and the land that protects the rest of Czechoslovakia would now be in the control of Germany. But what winds up happening is that Hitler winds up with the Sudetenland, and we'll discuss the specifics of how he gets it in the third section, but it boils down to the policy of appeasement. Appeasement is the policy of giving in to the demands of an aggressor in order to avoid war, and Britain and France were the kings of it, because right after Sudetenland, well, Hitler takes Czechoslovakia. Hitler was given the Sudetenland upon the guarantee that he would not take the rest of Czechoslovakia. However, not long, he turns around and invades the rest of Czechoslovakia. All of this, keep in mind, he has faced pretty much no pushback by the use of military force. Last thing is Poland, 1939, and Hitler is going to demand Danzig, access to the Polish corridor, which is access to the sea. And Danzig is mostly German, so again, violation of the Treaty of Versailles, still targeting areas that were historically German or had German people. Also, Hitler had signed a non-aggression pact with Poland in 1934. Regardless, September 1st, 1939, Hitler invades Poland. There you go. That's it for this section. Let's go back and take a look at that question. How did the rise of extremism affect international relations? Well, it created a ton of conflict, obviously. It also did create some instances of cooperation. Obviously, the use of appeasement was heavily used, and this allowed that conflict to occur. It also allowed Hitler to take more territory. And now we'll pretty much discuss the ramifications and specifics of most of Hitler's conquests around Europe in the third section of this chapter. The first section is mostly about what Hitler did. The next section, 3.2, takes a look at how the League is going to deal with this. Uh, I'm recording this after finishing editing and everything. Oh my goodness, I did not realize how long this takes and how much effort this requires. So I'm going to try to keep getting these out as quickly as possible. But yeah, oh dear.